Yeah, I know this may be a strange direction to start a video on the ass end side of a radio, but something I really wanted to show. It's not these switches. They're going away. Channel modification for starters. Telsat SSB-140 by Lafayette, but not mine. Customer's radio. Just turned it around and happened to notice, was checking things like fuses, like I say, switches are going away. Customer does not want this thing to have channel modification. And I happened to notice serial number 00000047. It's number 47. Wow, one of the first ones. First day production, man. They don't get much lower than that. Actually, they could only get 46 lower than that. But in any case, Telsat SSB-140. It works, receives, transmits. It's got problems. Nothing too serious. Reason I'm not going to show this powered up because I really don't want the radio to explode in my face. And what I'm afraid might explode in my face, see if it's cooled down yet. It's touchable now. This electrolytic capacitor, yeah, it's shorted out. Maybe not 100%. It may not be a complete, 0.00, something ohm dead short yet, but it's got to be getting damn close because I turned this thing on. And at 50 it works, but man, you talk on sideband, the meter lights just go whoop. They almost shut off. The power drops down to like 11. Right now it's hovering. Power supplies like 14.1 volts, and when you talk on sideband, it drops down to 11 something. And this capacitor in no time gets hot. I mean, eventually to the point where it's hard to put your finger on it. So yeah, before it vents and explodes in my face, I wanted to turn this thing off. But yeah, needs a little bit of work. Like I say, channel mod, that's going away. You can see one of the switches is already broke. Yes, whoever shipped this to the customer apparently used shredded paper, because actually there's more still in there. I've already vacuumed out probably a few sheets worth of paper out of this thing, and there's still more paper in it. God darn it. So another thing was the fuse. I guess somebody knew they were having power supply problems, because I can see the main regulator transistor has been replaced with a aftermarket GE. I'll actually stick not a substitute. I'll put what's supposed to be back in here. The fuse was blown, and somebody had the clip on, which is fine because they take pigtail fuses. Like this is what should be in there, a pigtail fuse. Okay, and it's not uncommon for people to not have those. So these are perfectly fine to use for stuff like that. Just have to be careful. The problem was I changed the fuse before I even turned it on, because it's supposed to be a 3 amp fuse and somebody had a 4 amp fuse. And then to make matters worse, it's supposed to be a fast acting fuse. They had a slow blow fuse, or an MDL4 in it. So yeah, don't be using slow blow fuses unless they're called for. So I will put like I say, just when I first powered it up, I stuck a proper 3 amp fast acting fuse in it. So I'll get that changed out though. These little clip-on things, like I'd said about being careful. Well, when this was clipped on there, just be careful, because this thing could come over and touch the heat sink, so you have to be careful of the exposed metal. But those work fine, though. The clarifier is unlocked in this, and if you crank it to the full clockwise rotation, the radio goes out of lock. So that's not 100% uncommon in radios, depending on how it was done. Now, it does have a modification, or maybe a bodged repair is probably more the proper term to use. And that bodged repair is underneath of this, right around this ceramic cap right here. And this is the oscillator, so you've got a crystal right here. You've got your crystals. So you've got an oscillator circuit right here. I haven't even pulled a schematic yet, but if memory serves correct, this ceramic cap and I think there's an inductor floating around here somewhere, make up part of that oscillator circuit. Now you're supposed to adjust frequency with these trimmer caps right here. Someone has bodged another ceramic trimmer cap on the underside of the board right here across this ceramic cap. So yes, you can see all the paper remnants. God, I hate shredded paper as packing material. It's so messy. There's more shit crammed up in here, as you can see. Shit's everywhere, man. But anyhow, there's that, move over here a little bit. So there's the ceramic trimmer somebody has bodged on the top side there. So we'll get that, make that go away. And if the crystal's bad, out of tolerance, I'll just replace it. Like I said, all this going away, resistors. Now luckily whoever did this did a very neat job cutting the circuit traces. So it's just a matter of unsolder all this and reconnect 3 circuit traces. And then it'll be back to original, all original 40 channels. Like I say, clarifiers unlocked. I didn't ask the customer about that. I'll ask. He probably will want to leave that. But other than a electrolytic capacitor change, it's basically being restored. It's a clean radio. Works good. Now I did notice the modulation signal meter here does stick. So if you have your modulation adjustment, or in hell is it, modulation calibration here, set too high in the needle, if it pegs right, it will stick. So I almost think the needle is sticking to the little bumper. Now they have 2 little plastic fingers that stick out off of the meter face. A lot of meters would have 2 metal fingers, a little piece of plastic tubing over them as bumper stops for the high and low, needle restriction. In this, it's just 2 pieces of plastic, and then they kind of put like almost like paint on rubber or something on there. I almost think, just looking down in there, it almost looks like the needle might be sticking to that stuff. So I'll have to pull this meter apart and take a look at that, see why it's hanging up. But otherwise, needs a cleanup. It needs to have, I've already vacuumed out, like I say, probably at least 1, if not 2 sheets of paper, and this crap is still falling out of it. So it definitely needs a good dusting. Really good dust brush and vacuum service. So, change the electrolytic capacitors. Well, the other thing and it actually receives seems fine. A little bit low, not to be unexpected. But transceiver alignment should bring that back up to snuff. One of my favorite chassis, Cybernets. I really like Cybernets. The old radios, good high quality crystal filters. So excellent. These are fantastic. Shouldn't say excellent. They're fantastic sideband radios. These are one of the best, and that's why these are very popular radios. The Telsat SSB-140s. I did notice the core has been broken and replaced in the VCO block. So normally the core that would be inside of this would have a square hollow core. It's no longer square and hollow. It's a normal violet core. So what would have originally been in there, you would have used this alignment tool, the square. But they're hollow, very brittle, and anything but this proper tool and fully seated, you try and turn those things, they crack. So it's not uncommon to see that. Usually using other cores, as long as you pick one with the right permeability, they work just fine. So there you go. There's just a preview. Like I say, the main big problem it has right now is this cap's about ready to try and eject itself from the circuit board up through the ceiling. So, and just out of curiosity, once I pull this, I want to hook this up to a power supply and an amp meter, just to see what the current draw, how much is being shorted internally in this thing. Because like I say, man, it doesn't take very long at all, and this thing gets hot. So I shall return. Not much skip rolling in right at the moment. Just a little bit.
Oh yeah, we got this Maytag, high efficiency, top load, the biggest capacity.
But in any case, so the radio is almost done now. All I have to do is replace the meter lights. I'll be installing LEDs in here. The ones, the lights work, but yeah, the bulbs are, almost none of them were replaced all at the same time, so they're all, looks like they're all from different manufacturers, and they're all at a different intensity, so I'm just going to go ahead. I need to straighten out the wiring for them. But other than that, the radio is pretty much done, other than its external cleanup when I put it back together. But the inside's done. Now, if you remember, this had, speaking of lights, had dimming light problems, when, especially when talking on sideband. And the power supply voltage was dropping rather drastically. And it had that electrolytic capacitor that was getting rather toasty warm. And also had that little double, kind of tack-on fuse, double-ended clip to replace the blown fuse, the pigtail fuse, which actually is right here. Now, since a lot of people don't have these, now, people like me, I repair radios for a living. I keep these in stock in pretty much every rating there is. The average Joe's not going to have these, and this is also one of those things you can't run down to the local, auto parts store and get. You can get an AGC 3 amp, but you ask them for a pigtail fuse like this, they'll probably look at you like you got 3 heads. So this is one of those power supply boards. There's plenty of room to install an actual fuse holder, so that's what I did. So there's now a fuse holder on here with a standard 3 amp AGC fuse. So if this fuse ever needs to be replaced again, you can just pop this out, and this is one of those fuses you can get pretty much anywhere. Auto parts stores, electronics, hell, you can probably go to Walmart and get a replacement to stick in here. And yes, you can safely touch this one. This is the low voltage fuse, so it's after the bridge rectifier. As a matter of fact, this side of the fuse is connected directly to the positive terminal in this electrolytic capacitor and then the bridge rectifier. So, like I say, this one's safe to touch. No chance of being put flat on your ass touching this one. The unsafe fuse, the 120 volt one's in the back panel. Like I say, capacitor, this is the one that got really hot. It's been replaced. Now, the actual low voltage problem, I don't think was the capacitor. The problem was actually the main voltage regulator. It's kind of hard to see. Oh, if I can get the camera over far enough, we'll flip it up. There you can see down in there. That's actually a brand new one. So that's been replaced. What someone had done was they stuck in a universal replacement. Okay, which is perfectly fine. And in matter of fact, we can cover that really quick. If you're familiar with brands there's not many left nowadays, but companies like NTE, they have substitutions. I use NTEs, and they work just fine. And most of the times, one transistor, they might list a transistor. Hell, it might cover 10, 20, 50 different transistors. The reason being what they're doing is they're using it for anything that's, can use up to that rating. So basically, whatever the maximum rating of the transistor that's supposed to be in here, but they'll also, any transistors that are basically the same but just have lower ratings. So you can use a higher rated one, just like diodes. Use a higher rated diode, then, could be substituted for any similar diode, let's say in the same voltage. You could use a higher voltage rating and a higher current. You just don't want to use lower. So substitutions are fine. And a lot of times, actually, when you install a substitute, it may be better than what you're putting in there. Well, whoever installed this one, this was not a better substitute. It was actually the wrong substitute. Now, this is I almost say an antique, because this is a GE 66. You can also tell it's old because it's gold-plated. I don't know how well that shows up in the camera, but that's actually gold-plated. And yeah, it even has round pins. So yeah, this thing is old. It's older than this radio. But if you cross-reference the transistor, actually what is in here now is what is supposed to be in it, a factory original. But if you cross-reference that to the old, and I've got some old GE guides, they use the wrong one even. So this transistor, actually, the ratings on this are too low. So that was the whole problem with the dimming lights. I replaced this transistor, power supply voltage drop, or dip. Yeah, that problem disappeared. So that's been fixed. I don't know why. It had a lot of work done in the audio section here. The audio output transformer. Actually, both these transformers looks like they had both been removed. I don't know if they were replaced or just removed and reinstalled. Looked like all of the electrolytic capacitors in this area had been removed and reinstalled, because they were all the same make, brand, series, date codes on them. They were the same as the rest of them in the radio, but everything in this area had been messed with. Lord only knows, and as I say, why ask why? It's all right. Any questionable solder joints were redone and touched up, so I straightened up a few things. So it's now a good working radio. Did not have any limiters clipped. Actually, the modulation, as it was set when I got the radio here, it was only doing, I think, like 80-85% modulation. They actually had, you see, actually, this is the modulation adjustment for this radio. And it's at about, 10:30, 11 o'clock position. Well, it was way over here. I mean, it was, it's set at 100% now. Yeah, it was, like I say, it was cranked around in the other direction. It was actually like 80-85%. So, But all that's been taken care of, adjusted properly. The SSB ALC circuit's adjusted properly, and everything's working like it's supposed to. Receiver sensitivity. It's an old Cybernet chassis. It's fantastic reception. So actually, if I switch over to the test set here, set up. And let's see, plug in the speaker. Okay, we can see we have, just turn this down, so I'm down as far as this signal generator will go, 0.05 microvolts, which is minus 133 dBm, wherever the hell the dBm, there we go. It's actually just a no minus sign there, but that's minus 133 dBm. And you can see the Synad 25 and a half, call it 25. Amazing reception. But what can I say? It's a Cybernet, and these things can hear a mouse fart on Mars. I mean, amazing receiver sensitivity and good clarity. They just sound really good. That's another reason I like the Cybernets. Now, don't let measurements fool you here. You'll see me do another Cybernet, or maybe a Uniden, or even something else that doesn't have quite as good a numbers. It might be 0.06 or 0.1 for 12 dB Synad. Honestly, people, to the human ear, no, well, actually, that much you might notice, but a lot of times these measurements, they're so close in reality, it's not perceptible to the human ear. It's measurable with instrumentation, but to the human ear, you're talking about signal levels that are, I know you don't measure signal strength with a microscope, but it makes a handy talking term, microscopic or tiny signal level differences. Like I say, something that's not really even perceptible that much to the human ear. It's measurable with instrumentation, though. So, one is better than the other. But honestly, guys, you're never really going to notice a difference. There's just as many good Uniden chassis out there as there are Cybernets. So actually, let's switch over to AM now. And turn the volume back up. So we can see we got 9.5, somewhere around there, dB. It looks like we're right around 0.11 microvolts, or minus 126.2 dBm for 12 dB Synad, maybe just a hair more. Yeah. If we go to 0.12 microvolts, it's almost to 13. So, yeah, right around 0.12 to 0.11 microvolts. Again, excellent receiver sensitivity. Exactly what I would expect out of a Cybernet, especially this chassis. Like I say, the Lafayette Telsat SSB-140s are extremely popular chassis for a reason, especially for sideband guys and gals. They're an excellent chassis. Super ears, no modifications. And I just think I guess you could almost call it a tonal quality. They sound better. Not only do they receive a little bit better, like I say, a lot of that's not really perceptible to the human ear, but I just think the sound quality and the filtering is a little bit better for sideband listening, and same with transmit. Actually, the transmit audio is very good. This chassis has really good speech circuit as far as the audio amplifier, your mic audio amplifier circuit goes. So they do sound really good. So there you go. There's just a quickie overview of the Lafayette Telsat SSB-140. Let's see if sideband's coming back in yet. Nah, it's still pretty much not much to speak of. Oh, one other thing. Well, actually, two other things I should quickly cover. it's I don't want to say it's a problem, but it's a misunderstood. Some people are confused by the way these buttons work. Okay, there's two levels of writing. There's an upper and a lower level of writing. And you can see it shows button pushed in and button out. So it's with the button in, it's whatever's written on top. The little button picture out, that's whatever's written at the bottom. Okay, modulation calibration. The way you do that, so you want to be in calibrate, which is button out. Because you can see button out, calibration. And what you do is you're going to be using this meter over here, modulation meter. You would just pick, say, center, but key to microphone. You adjust that for center of scale. And then when you push it in, audio, check 1, 2, audio. When you're talking in, you can see it was right at the 90% here, 100% actually right at the end of that white scale. So, audio, radio, check 1, 2. So that's how that button works. Another button, not that it's kind of self-explanatory, but it's one thing I like about these radios. It has a tone switch, so a high and low tone. So especially AM, yeah, it doesn't make so much difference. But if you're trying to pull in a weak station on sideband a lot of times, you hear that the sizzling bake-in, the white background noise, whatever you want to call it. Now, for starters, these a lot of radios, you'll notice when you push the noise blanker button in, you don't notice any difference on sideband. This one, if you listen, turn the volume up some, there is a difference. And it actually works really well on sideband. The other thing is, and it's why I like tone buttons, it's one way to get around needing uber expensive filtering networks inside the radio. Basically, you're just adding a cap or a capacitor into the audio circuit here, and it's bleeding off the high frequency. So when you push that button in stands for low. So you're basically drawing off the high frequency signals. But what that does is it helps to take a lot of that staticky, really high-pitched noise out. So it's not as noticeable. And like I say, a lot of times, if you just have a signal that's barely intelligible, that's enough right there to make it to where you can actually pull that signal in and understand what the person's saying. So that's another feature I like. I wish more radios had an actual tone switch. I wish more radios were like Cybernets, had noise blankers that actually did a halfway decent job on sideband, because most of them, honestly, you can sit there and push the noise blanker buttons all day, and there's no, unless it's a good impulse noise, like an ignition type system pulse noise, you really don't notice any noise difference with the noise blankers. These radios, it is a noticeable difference, especially on sideband when you use the noise blanker, because the A&L is not for sideband. A&L works only on AM. That's pretty much the standard for pretty much all radios. But the noise blankers, like I say, I think they work a little bit extra good in these radios, so it helps to clear up your background noise a little bit even more on these. So there you go, Lafayette Telsat SSB-140.